everybody to Let's Talk. I'm Pastor Brett.
Along with Pastor Trenton. How y'all doing?
It's good to be back with you guys today. Last week we were kind of ending a series a little bit, and this week we're going to be getting into a new series that we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be pretty exciting. So first things first, though, if you're checking us out for the first time, or if you checked us out for the last few times and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and please subscribe. Hit the like button and hit that bell so you get all the notifications, and we would appreciate it a lot. We really enjoy coming in here and digging into these topics a little bit and doing a little Bible study, and we hope that maybe you guys are getting something out of it as well. So, Trenton?
That's our purpose. We're hoping you guys are getting something out of it. That once again, hit us up at the email, wait.letstalk@gmail.com. It's listed on your screen right now. Hit us up. We want to know what you want to talk about. You got questions about topics, you got thoughts, stuff you'd like to see us discussing here on the air. Maybe you got something you'd like us to research out. I'm always excited to do a little bit of research because I always end up learning something. So, like Brett said, we kind of closed out on our It's Time to Move series. However, that doesn't mean it's time for you to stop moving. You still need to move.
You just need to move on into a different area.
And this series we're getting ready to start today kind of ties in with that, because a lot of people will look at each other and they'll be like, how is God going to use me to make a difference? Look at me. Look what I've done. Look at all this stuff going on. But this new series we're starting today is called Come As You Are. And we call it that because in order for you to get moving, sometimes you need a little bit of an encouragement, knowing that God uses regular people, real people, to make a real difference, like I talk about on our Unified show, all the time. And it's always a real person. Now when I say a real person, I mean they're dealing with life. They go through regular issues just like the rest of us. And God ends up using them to make an entire big difference in this world. So I'm excited to talk about that. I hope this will be an encouragement to you. We'll probably take a few episodes or whatever to talk a little bit about this. But we're going to talk a little bit about David and where he came from. So what else you got, Brett?
I was just thinking, I think we talked a little bit about one of the past episodes, or I don't know, we've done so many shows here in the last few months, but I was thinking about the disciples, before we get into the David thing. Just regular, ordinary people that answered a call, and that's really all God's looking for, is somebody that's going to answer the call. And I think that's we see that a lot in the Old Testament, especially with Paul or whatever, that was actually going around persecuting and killing Christians, and then Christ came to him in a vision or whatever, and Paul answered that call. And look what Paul ended up doing.
Changing the world.
Most of the New Testament is written,
by a man that started.
Yeah, by a man that was killing Christians, but it was just somebody that he answered the call and he was willing to do what God asked him to do. So, things like that. Just because you may feel like God can't use me or that I'm a nobody, it doesn't mean that you are. And we're going to see that today as we start to go through this here in 1 Samuel.
Yeah, 1 Samuel chapter 16, where we're going to be hanging out here today. Also want to add, when we say all this, we're saying yes, God can use you to make a difference.
If he can use me, he can use you.
So if you're listening to this episode, we're talking to you. We're not just talking to that person sitting next to you. We're talking to you. We're talking to us. God uses us to make a difference. It's all in the decisions you make. Are you going to decide to follow Christ, or are you going to decide to go your own way and tell him where you'll end up? But when you're talking about disciples, I'm reminded we've been doing a Bible study called Through the Book on the Next Level Freedom Church channel on YouTube. Y'all can subscribe to that if you want to here when you get done checking this out. But we've been looking at the book of Mark, and we talked about the call of Levi, and I can't remember if it was it's one of the recent episodes that we had recorded on the show. And Levi himself was a tax collector. So people despised him for what he did, and God still used him to make a difference as well. And there's a little bit of debate on Levi, who he actually was, and we talk about that in the Bible study. So, but either way, he was called by Christ, he accepted the call, and it was a life-changing decision. So, 1 Samuel chapter 16. You want to read? You want me to read? What's up?
Go ahead.
All right, we're going to start there in verse 1 of chapter 16. And once again, we're reading out the English Standard Version for those of you that follow along with us here. Or you can just follow on your screen. It says, "The Lord said to Samuel, 'How long will you grieve over Saul?'" So I guess I better set the stage here before we get a little too far with this. At this point, Saul has made a mistake. The people had nominated him king. He was king for so long, and then he made some bad choices, and God ended up removing his anointing from him. And God basically is telling Samuel here in just a second. So basically this is kind of where it's at. Samuel's grieving over Saul still and the mistakes he made, and God is stopping him in his tracks saying, how long are you going to grieve for Saul? Since I rejected him from being king over Israel, for your horn of oil, or fill your horn with oil, and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me. And the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. And invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me him who I declare to you. And Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, do you come peaceably? And he said, peaceably. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. And I want to stop right there for a second. I almost stopped sooner, but I want to kind of key in on some things that's going on here in this passage, and we can talk about them a little bit. So basically, God's told Samuel, so there's a lot of stuff happening here. God's told Samuel it's time to move on. Quit grieving for Saul. I've anointed another king. I need you to go, and I need you to anoint this king. And he tells him who to go to. Now, I often wonder to myself, when the Bible says, I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite. It's like, I don't know, I guess they know who these people are. I mean, it's almost as if God just assumes they know who you're talking about. That, or you get to the city and you ask, I need to see Jesse the Bethlehemite. But so I often wondered that just in the back of my head. That's just something I do when I'm
It could have been too that the more well-off people may have been known by certain prophets or whatever. I don't know, and that's just an idea. But like I said, I mean, I've often wondered that too. Like, how do they know who these people are, other than the fact that it could have been, well off back then meant lots of sons and lots of farm. And lots of land and lots of animals and things like lots of livestock. You're probably more well known. People know who you are.
Yeah.
So possibility.
And I guess the region isn't huge. This area that they're talking about, but so Jesse the Bethlehemite. So God tells him to go, and then I notice immediately it's kind of like God when He calls us. Fear enters Samuel. He's like, how am I going to do that? Saul's going to kill me if he finds out what I'm doing. So there's always that initial fear when God places a calling on your life. And I kind of want to hit there for just a second, and you just jump in anytime. But that initial fear, let's talk about that for a second. God calls you to do something, and it seems risky in your own mind. So what's your response? That's what basically we find out here. Samuel accepted and went, but he was scared. So he was just a regular human just like us. So, Brett, when you got called to ministry, what was your thoughts? Or give us some example.
Okay, I liken it to this, okay? Say you've got a really good job. Things are going really good for you. You're making $30, $40 an hour, right? And you've got lots of seniority at your job. And then all of a sudden, you have this opportunity to make this life-changing thing that's going to be better for your family, but you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same, to me anyway, it's kind of the same thing where you're going along in life, and life is pretty good, or at least you think it is, and then God calls you and says, hey, I want you to be a preacher, or hey, I want you to go on a mission trip, or just whatever it is. All of a sudden you're like, well, now wait a minute. You go back and you get scared, and you start doing this pros and cons list in your head, That's kind of how I liken it to it, because you never know what's going to happen on the other side of what you're being called to. It's just like if you move jobs, you never know what's going to happen on the other side of that job. You could get laid off, you could get fired, the business could go under, or whatever. But what you have to understand, though, is if God is the one calling you, regardless of what you're going to go through, if He's called you to it, He will take you through it. So it doesn't matter what it is. And so if you're being called right now, and you know that it's God, make sure it's God, because if you step into something that's not God, then yeah, you have a possibility of failing, because it's not what God has really called you to. But if you know He's calling you, and it's clear, then if God's calling you to it, He'll bring you all the way through it. And it may be some rough patches in the middle there, but you're going to get to the end of that and you'll be better off in the end. So
I always comes to mind, for those of you that don't know, which is maybe the majority of you watching, I have no idea, about, let's see, 2012. So it was August 10, 2012, we hopped and jumped to Tennessee, me and my wife. We was going along pretty good. I mean, we was getting along pretty good, and this is just one example. I've had several of these instances in my lifetime. So I always try to go with what God is telling me to do. But anyway, I kind of compare myself to Abraham at that moment when that happened, because it's like God was asking me to leave everything I knew and jump to a state that I've never been in except passing through a few times, or maybe going to Nashville or Memphis. But God was calling me to move to Jackson, Tennessee. And it sounded crazy. My wife, at first, she thought it was nuts. And, you know, the more we prayed about it, the more we realized that this was what God was calling us to do. Well, it wasn't until we got there and got established a little bit that we actually realized God's reasoning behind calling us to Tennessee. It looked crazy at first. We were leaving everything behind that we'd ever known. I didn't know that I'd be back, to be honest. I didn't know if I was coming back to the area or not, but you know, then God called us back to the area, so that's fine too. But my point is, if you know it's God, then in my opinion, it's worth taking the chance. So, because you know that if it's God, then He's already got it paved out before you. But like he was saying, if it's not God, then's when you gotta worry. So, or maybe if you're getting ahead of God, would be another way.
You know what? There's nothing wrong with being cautious, neither. You know, if he just would have jumped ship the first day that he heard something, and what if he would have been wrong? Mm-hmm. You know, you got to take things before God, and you have to pray about things, and that's what God expects you to do.
Yeah.
You know, because you got to make sure you're listening to the right spirit, because there are spirits out there that are out there to steal, kill, and destroy. You know, so you got to take that into consideration as well. Don't just jump into something that you think might be God. You got to make sure, and you got to know that it's what you're supposed to be doing. So.
Yeah, I mean, we felt that call in like February. We didn't actually move till August, so I mean, like you said, if we'd have jumped right away, it'd have been too soon. So, but you know, it's all in God's timing as well. But anyway, you look at Samuel here, and God's telling him to do something it's a risk because of how Saul was. That he's like, he's going to kill me if he finds out what I did. So this is when God said, okay, well, you tell him, or you take a heifer with you. He not tell him, I'm sorry. And then you can say you've come to make a sacrifice. So then it looks less obvious to the people around because you're coming to sacrifice to God. And I'm sure Samuel at this time was known as a prophet of God. He was known as a man of God. So people kind of knew who he was, and they want to know if you come peaceably or are you here. So he went. So what happens next is yet another amazing thing, because you got to understand. Well, let's read. Let's read and we'll talk about it because I don't want to get ahead of myself. But verse 6, where we left off there in 1 Samuel 16, says, when they came, he took on Eli and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is before me. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. And then Jesse made Shammah pass by. And he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. And Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen these. And then Samuel said to Jesse, are all of your sons here? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, and behold, he is keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and get him, for we will not sit down till he comes here. And he sent and brought him in. And now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward. And Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. So check it out. Once again, man, I like this. I always like this story because things aren't always as we think they are when we're human. And I know you've heard sermons preached on that probably 100 times. But Samuel approaches the first son here. And this guy, you know, he looking pretty good. He looked like he could be a pretty good leader. But, you know, it's like God was telling Samuel after that first kid, he said, I look to the heart, and this isn't him. And you're going to find that Eliab, the one that was the first one that came before Samuel, is the one that also criticizes David later on when he goes to face Goliath. So he's the oldest brother. You know, he would have been, in man's eyes, the most worthy to do such a thing. I mean, Samuel's also coming. You got to remember, they said that Saul was heads above everybody else, or he was a big man. They're assuming he was around 7 feet tall. He was a big man. So when he was anointed king, people are like, oh yeah, we can follow this guy. So now Samuel's going from this guy to maybe, they assume, I've heard guesses that maybe David was around 5'2". Either way, he was a little guy. You're talking 2 foot difference there. And so Samuel's going from this king that appears to be a king to this shepherd boy who's in the field, and either dad has forgotten about him, or dad just figured, well, he's the youngest and you ain't going to want to see him anyway. He's not a king. So what's your thoughts, Brett?
I was thinking, I like how God prepared Samuel. You know, you had just read it. You know, Samuel's like, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. It says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. And at the same, he said that, okay, that's not the one, but at the same time, he's preparing Samuel for what he's about to see. Like, Samuel thinks he's going to be this big, huge, bulky warrior, and here comes a little shepherd boy that's, you know, probably weighs like a $110 sopping wet.
Good looking.
So he's mentally preparing Samuel for what he's about to see, and I just thought that was kind of comical, you know. But
I you know, just in my head, I don't know the brothers, I don't know because I didn't live back then, but I wonder if they went from like tallest to shortest in their age too. So you get down to this little guy, it's like we're going downhill here, God, what's going on? But it gets to the last one, and God saw David's heart. And if you've read the Bible, the Psalms, it talks about David being a man after God's own heart. So God was seeing David for who he was. Everybody else, I mean, the way it's talking about him is just talking about him with beautiful eyes, and he was handsome. This could have been considered the mama's boy. I don't know. But like the kid that you would have least expected God to use is the one God was going to use to win several battles for Israel. So
you know, it seems like it's that way in life today. Some of the, and I don't mean this in any wrong way, but some of the people you expect the least to be mighty warriors of God or whatever are the ones that you see actually.
Look at us.
I don't know about this, but I'm just saying I mean, there's been lots of people that I wouldn't suspect would have actually done some of the things that they've done, and then there they are doing it. But all it is it's a calling and a willing heart, man, and that's what I get from a lot of this, is just somebody being willing to step forward and take on the role that God has for him. You could change the world just by simply saying, I'll give it a shot, you know, because like I said, God's not asking you to be perfect. He wasn't asking David to be perfect. He wasn't asking David to have, you know, bulk up and have these huge muscles or anything. He was going to lead him into everything that he was going to have to do. He was going to be taught everything that he was going to have to do as king over Israel. So, you know, I just look at it like you got to take the first step. Once you take the first step, God's going to show you something, and then the next step, God will show you something. It's going to be a continual learning process, whatever it is God's calling you into. And I think that's really what it was probably for David as well.
And don't fall for the deception of what you think looks like what God's going to use to make a difference. Because like he said, I've seen people that I would have never thought were making the difference they're making today, all because they chose to say yes when God called, or when Jesus called, when Jesus decided to step into their lives and they decided to allow him to come in. He has changed men. He has changed men to make a huge difference. I don't even know where. I mean, I heard a story about Billy Graham, and I know that he's passed recently. So, but Billy Graham, it was a sweet old lady that was praying for him, or something. It just comes from humble beginnings, and then all of a sudden, that man has made a bigger difference, at least in the 20th century, than any other minister that we've had. I mean, he's made a difference in so many people's lives, and it was all because he was willing to say yes to the call. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Billy. I'd recommend seeing it, because you should see some of the stuff that he had to face. And I know it's a movie, so Hollywood betrays their portion, but some of the stuff, like his best friend turned an atheist, in the middle of a crusade. Or he was a crusade. He was leading big crusades. This is his mentor, the one that's been teaching him, the one he's been traveling with. And all of a sudden he becomes an atheist because he's looking at the world around him and he's seeing the mess and then people dying, people getting sick. And it's like he was blaming God, so he just decided he wasn't going to believe in God anymore. And I will never forget the scene from that movie when his friend, I think his first name was Chris or something, right?
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to think of what his name was, because I remember the story, but I can't remember his name.
Well-known evangelist. Billy Graham kind of followed in his shadow for a little bit until Billy decided to stay on the right path, and he went the wrong way. But the look he gave Billy, it's like, that's the look. I mean, the look was, it was like the devil looking right at you. I just remember the look. And at that point, he had to make a decision. Am I going to move forward with this? Am I going to move forward with God, what God's telling me to do? I'm sure it hurt, man. You're looking at somebody that you've looked up to all these years. And all of a sudden, boom, he turned and it's gone. And you're on your own. So he had to make a choice at that point. And I think there's a lot of people after that look and after that debate, that first initial debate that he had with that guy, that would have given up. But he didn't. He was willing to accept the fact that he can't explain everything, but he knows what God's told him to do. So I want to say that as an encouragement to those of you out there watching us right now, because there is always, and I've said this several times on several of the shows we've done, that there's always going to be critics. There's always going to be people telling you can't do it, or there's always going to be people that are coming against you. Even Jesus himself had people coming against him, the Pharisees, the religious competitors, if you want to call them that were coming against Jesus while he was teaching. And it's like we talked about, I don't know if it's the last show or what, but, Jesus said, I was persecuted, so just expect it. They're going to persecute you too. So, your thoughts?
If they hate you, they hated me first. That I've always looked at that verse, because how many times, it's like you're going to suffer persecution. You're going to, and I hate to say it, but here in America, we don't suffer persecution really like
other countries.
Like other countries do. We kind of have it easy. Of course, we've talked about that in the past too. But just looking back over everything that we've read today, if you're on the fence with something, well, I don't want to say on the fence because there's really no fence, but if God's called you to something and you're just kind of trying to decide what to do with it, keep praying about it. Don't jump, because if it's what God has called you to, there's going to be a clear-cut sign, or you're just going to know, that He's calling you to it. But at the same time, don't be afraid to make that decision. Don't be afraid to, how do I want to say it? Don't be afraid to pray about it. I think as I was younger,
take a step.
It was like, if I pray about this, I might get an answer, and I might not like the answer. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to take it before God and just say, God, I think that this is what you're calling me to. Could you show me? Could you show me something? And if it is, He's going to show it to you. And that's just like me being called to preach or whatever. You keep getting asked to preach, and you keep saying, I'm not a preacher. Well, somebody's right and somebody's wrong. I'm pretty sure that I was wrong. I keep getting called to preach. It might be God trying to show me something in my life, and I was just trying to reject it. So, things like that, look for things like that. Whatever it is, going on a mission trip, or moving to the mission field, and actually, whatever it is, take it before God. Well, all I
got one more thing I want to hit on real quick, and it was about the timing thing. We kind of talked about it earlier. There in verse 13, it says, Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward. Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. But when David was anointed king, he was king of Israel. However, there was a timing thing. It was 30 to 40 years. I can't remember the exact amount of years it actually took for him to get from this point, like a 15-year-old boy, they believe, to where he was when he became king, which was like 40 or something. It's a while. So there was a road, there was a process that he had to take to get to that point. Now, God did give David that call. It was his gifting. But what I want you to understand is the fact that just because you've gotten the call, I'm guilty when I first got in ministry too, jumping right in there and saying, okay, let's go. But there was a whole road, and there's still a road. There's a process of growing there that God wants to use, a process of maturing. So just because it doesn't happen right now, that's not a reason for you to get discouraged. That's a reason for you to be encouraged, because that means God's cooking up something good for you, and you just got to get to that point and learn what you can while you're waiting. So he got the call and he became king then, but he didn't actually take the throne until
Well, you know, he's
30, 40
probably
years later. So
spending, like we said earlier, spending a lot of that time probably learning a lot of things, having experiences of, you know, that he was going to learn how to deal with things as king. You know, that was it's a process, and it's the same way with being just being a Christian or being a minister or pastor or anything. There's this process that you're going to continually grow, and then you're going to have these, what you want to call them, highlights or big parts of your life, and then you're going to come back down here and you're going to learn a bunch more stuff, and then something else is going to, another impact of your life is going to happen, and you're going to continue to grow and mature until the day you die.
And if you ever think you've made it, you need to start back at the basics.
So see, that's when the party really happens. Is when you die, you get to go home and get to go, and then you get to get all the answers and see where you were wrong all these years. But
we are going to talk more about that process next time in this series, because we're going to jump over to chapter 17, where, familiar story to those of you that are familiar with any Bible stories is when David kills Goliath, the David and Goliath story. But also, we're going to take a look at some of the ways God was preparing David up to that point to be ready to kill the giant that he had in his life. So that was in Israel's life, to make that difference and to make that change. So, but yeah. So hit us up on the email, wait.letstalk@gmail.com. I want to say that real quick as it's popping up on your screen. Like this page or subscribe to this page on YouTube. Subscribe to Next Level Freedom Church. That's the website for our church here, for the church I'm pastoring. We do Bible studies. We talk to real people on the show Unified. So check that out if you get a moment. Brett?
one thing I do want to do is, if you guys are watching this right now, do us a favor and share this video. I mean, like it, subscribe to it, that's great, but share the video on your Facebook page, or send it, text some people and send it to them that way, that they might like to enjoy it, or checking out a Bible study or something. But do that for us. Just send it to somebody or share it on your Facebook page. We'd appreciate it. And you can check me out on Give 'em Truth Ministries on YouTube, and we also have a Facebook page. It's Give and then EM, not them, but EM Truth Ministries. And like the Facebook page, get all the updates and stuff I put on there, and please subscribe to the YouTube page as well.
I guess that's it for today's show. I hope you've been encouraged. I hope you're blessed. I hope you're watching. I hope you're sharing, like he said. Share it on your Facebook page. Share it out there. Help us spread the word. But not only that, make sure you hit us up on the email. Let us know what you want us to talk about, because we would love to hit on topics that those of you watching are curious about. So it's another purpose of the show, is to hopefully get you engaged and involved as well. So and it gives us a chance to have some Bible study and some good chats here on the air. So I guess that's it. So until next time, this is Trent Cruz.
Pastor Brett, thanks for watching.
All right, thanks. See you guys. God bless.